I arrived at Midwest Distribution Center on Chicago's South Side 15 minutes early for my first night shift. The parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars here and there across the cracked asphalt. The building itself was a massive concrete rectangle with few windows, looking more like a prison than a warehouse. But the pay was double standard warehouse rates, which explained why I hadn't asked many questions during my interview. The security guard barely looked up from his phone as I showed my newly printed ID badge. He just pointed toward a side door with a blinking light above it. Inside, the air felt heavy and still. The entrance hallway opened into a small office area where a man sat at a metal desk writing something in a notebook. He looked up as I approached. "James Mitchell?" he asked, standing. "That's me." Roger Sullivan was tall and gaunt with deep-set eyes that looked like they hadn't seen a good night's sleep in years. His warehouse supervisor uniform hung loosely on his thin frame, and his handshake was surprisingly strong. "First night," he said. It wasn't a question. "You picked a good time to start. We're short-staffed." The pay was pretty convincing, I admitted. Roger nodded but didn't smile. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, handing it to me. "Before we start the tour, read this. Memorize it." I unfolded the paper. It contained 5 handwritten rules. 1. Never touch items that move on their own. 2. Stay away from the center of the warehouse. If you find yourself there, run north. 3. If someone calls your name, verify their face before responding. 4. Never enter the break room during night shift. 5. Ignore all voices that don't come from a person you can see. I laughed, looking up at Roger. Is this some kind of initiation prank for the new guy? Roger's expression didn't change. Those aren't company policy. They won't be in any handbook or training video, but they're essential for survival. My smile faded as I looked at his face for any hint of humor. There was none. "Follow them or don't come back tomorrow," he continued, his voice flat. "There won't be enough of you left to fire." I folded the paper and put it in my pocket, unsure how to respond. Roger turned and gestured for me to follow him through a set of double doors. The warehouse was huge. The ceiling was at least 40 feet high, with industrial lights hanging in rows. Many were dim or blinking, making some areas dark while others were lit up by bright fluorescent lights. Tall metal shelving units made aisles that went into the dark areas. "Nearly 500,000 square feet," Roger said, his voice echoing slightly. 26 sections labeled A through Z. You'll be handling inventory in sections G through K tonight. He handed me an electronic tracker, similar to the inventory devices I'd used at previous warehouse jobs. System's simple enough. Scan the barcode on each shelf, then scan the items. Device will tell you if counts are off. Note any discrepancies. As we walked deeper into the warehouse, I noticed something odd about the inventory. There seemed to be no organization to the products. A shelf of household cleaners sat beside children's toys, which were next to canned foods. "Is there a system to how things are arranged?" I asked. Roger glanced at me. "Not one that makes sense to us. Don't worry about it. Just count what's there." We reached section G, marked by a large letter painted on the concrete floor. Roger checked his watch. "Your shift runs from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Take your legally mandated breaks whenever you want, but..." He paused. "Remember Rule 4. The overhead lights flickered, plunging us momentarily into darkness before coming back on. I flinched, but Roger didn't react. "Don't worry about that," he said, already walking away. "But if you hear anything that sounds like scraping metal, move to a different section immediately." "Wait," I called after him. "What about training? Safety procedures?" Roger stopped and turned. "The rules are your safety procedures. Follow them and you'll be fine." He pointed to my pocket where I'd put the list. "That's your training." Then he was gone, disappearing between the tall shelves, leaving me alone in the huge space. I looked down at the inventory device in my hand, then up at the shelves standing above me. The pay was good. Really good. and I needed the money badly enough to put up with some weirdness. I started scanning, working through the shelves step by step. The items were as random as they had first appeared. Designer handbags next to motor oil, baby formula beside fishing tackle. Nothing made sense, but the inventory system seemed simple enough. I'd been working for about 20 minutes when I heard it, a sound like fingernails dragging across steel coming from somewhere deeper in the warehouse. I stopped, remembering Roger's warning about scraping metal. The sound faded, replaced by something that made the hair on my arms stand up. Whispers, too quiet to make out words, but definitely like hushed talking. It seemed to come from the next aisle over. I remembered Rule 5, ignore all voices. Just the ventilation system, I muttered to myself, focusing harder on the inventory device. But I knew ventilation systems didn't whisper. I moved faster, looking at items with less care than I should have. The job was already strange, but the money was too good to walk away. I had rent due next week and my bank account was nearly empty. Whatever weird games they played with new employees, I could handle it. But as I moved deeper into Section G, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in the aisle, and whoever or whatever was with me wasn't on the night shift roster. 3 hours into my shift, the warehouse had settled into a weird rhythm. The soft beep of my inventory scanner broke up the silence as I worked through Section H, counting and logging items. The randomness of the inventory still bothered me. Luxury watches next to garden fertilizer, wedding dresses beside automotive parts. But I'd stopped questioning it and focused on the task. I was scanning a shelf of canned goods when something moved above me. A can of tomato soup wobbled at the edge of the top shelf, then tipped over. I stepped back just as it fell, hitting the concrete floor with a sharp metallic clang that bounced through the aisle. The can should have rolled away from the point of impact. That's basic physics. Instead, it rolled directly toward my feet, as if drawn to me. I stopped moving, Roger's first rule flashing in my mind: never touch items that move on their own. I took another step back, keeping my hands raised slightly. The can stopped about a foot from my work boots, then slowly rotated in place, the label turning to face me. The soup inside made a sloshing sound, though the can wasn't moving enough to cause it. After a moment, it changed direction and rolled behind a nearby shelf, disappearing from view. I felt really scared, but I forced myself to return to scanning. Just follow the rules, I told myself. The pay is worth it. A piercing scream cut through the warehouse silence. It came from somewhere to my left, maybe 2 aisles over. Without thinking, I dropped my scanner and ran toward the sound, weaving through the maze of shelving. I rounded the corner into Section J and saw her, a young woman in the standard warehouse uniform, clutching her right hand to her chest. Blood seeped between her fingers, dripping onto the concrete floor. Her face was pale with shock. "It bit me!" she cried when she saw me. With her uninjured hand, she pointed to something on the floor near her feet. It was a toy robot, about 8 inches tall, made of blue and silver plastic. The kind of cheap thing you'd find in a dollar store. Its tiny jaw was hinged open, and I could see a red stain on the plastic teeth. "What happened?" I asked, moving toward her but giving the toy a wide berth. "I was just doing inventory," she said, her voice shaking. "It fell off the shelf, and I picked it up to put it back, and—" She broke off, looking down at her bleeding hand. I heard rapid footsteps, and suddenly Roger was there, appearing from between the shelves like he'd materialized out of nowhere. He moved with surprising speed for his gaunt frame, grabbing the woman by her uninjured arm and pulling her away from the toy. "Don't look at it," he said sharply, positioning himself between her and the robot. I noticed he was careful to keep his own eyes averted from the toy as well. "I need to get her to the security office," Roger said to me. "There's a first aid kit there. Get back to your section." "I can help," I offered. "No. Follow the rules. Stick to your assigned area." His tone left no room for argument. As they walked away, I noticed her name tag: Megan. She looked young, probably mid-20s. Her reddish-brown ponytail had partly come undone in the mess. I went back to Section H, got my scanner, and tried to focus on inventory again, but my mind kept replaying what I'd seen. A toy that bit someone. A can that moved on its own. The rules suddenly felt less like a prank and more like a survival guide. For the next hour, I worked like a robot, jumping at every small sound. Twice more, I saw objects fall from shelves without being touched. First, a glass paperweight that hit the floor without breaking, then rolled under a shelf. Later, a book that fell down and landed open on the concrete. As I stood there, not moving, the pages began to turn on their own, flipping quickly from front to back before the book slammed shut. Each time I followed the first rule. I didn't touch them. I didn't even get close. After the book thing, I walked to a completely different aisle to continue working. Around 1:30 a.m., I ran into Roger again. He was coming out of the security office near the front of the warehouse. "How's Megan?" I asked. "She'll live," he said, closing the office door behind him. "She's new. Hasn't learned the rules yet. That toy, don't ask questions you don't want answers to." Roger cut me off. "Just keep following the rules. Look," Roger sighed, lowering his voice. "You seem like you're taking this seriously, which is good. Most new people think the rules are a joke until something happens. Megan will be okay because it was just a small one. Others haven't been so lucky." I wanted to ask what he meant by a small one, but he was already walking away. "Stick to your sections," he called over his shoulder. "Finish your inventory." I returned to work, now hyper-aware of every item on the shelves around me. The warehouse felt different now, less like a strange workplace and more like a minefield. I found myself looking around at the tops of shelves, watching for any sign of movement. At exactly 2 a.m. by my watch, I was counting boxes of light bulbs in Section K when I heard it. A child's voice, clear as day, coming from behind a pallet of bottled water at the end of the aisle. "James," it called softly. "James, can you help me?" The fifth rule echoed in my head. Ignore all voices that don't come from a person you can see. I kept scanning, trying to steady my hands. "James, please," the voice called again, sounding scared now. "I'm lost. I need help." My hands were shaking so badly I had to rescan the same box 3 times. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to focus on the inventory numbers, to pretend I hadn't heard anything. "James, I can see you. Why won't you help me?" I moved farther down the aisle, putting distance between myself and the voice. My price gun beeped with each item, a reassuring sound of normal life in this increasingly weird night. The voice didn't follow me. After a few minutes of silence, I looked back toward the water pallet. Nothing was there, no child, no movement, just shadows and quiet. I checked my watch again. 2:15 a.m. Less than 4 hours to go. I could make it. I just had to keep following the rules. I realized I had lost track of the section markers around 3 a.m. The inventory work had put me in a rhythm that made time blur, and I'd been following the shelves without paying attention to where they led me. Now I was in unfamiliar territory. The aisles here were much narrower than in my assigned sections, forcing me to turn sideways in spots to squeeze between shelves. The air felt different too, colder, with a heaviness that made each breath slightly uncomfortable. I pulled out the rough map Roger had drawn on the back of my rule sheet and tried to figure out where I was. The large letter painted on the floor nearby was partly covered by a fallen box, but I could make out enough to see it was a P, Section P. My stomach tightened as I realized how far I'd wandered from my assigned area. The second rule popped into my head. Stay away from the center of the warehouse. If you find yourself there, run north. I wasn't sure if P was the center, but it was definitely closer than I should be. I needed to head north, back toward the front of the building and my assigned sections. I pulled out my phone and opened the compass app, watching the needle settle. Once I knew which way to go, I turned north and started walking quickly, not quite running, but moving with purpose. The inventory in this section was different from what I'd been counting earlier. Instead of random consumer goods, these shelves held items that seemed deliberately strange. A row of glass containers caught my eye, each about the size of a mason jar, but with weird geometric shapes. Inside each one, something dark moved on its own. Not liquid, but something like shadows with substance, twisting and curling inside their glass containers. I kept walking, trying not to look too closely at the stuff. On the next shelf, a collection of old dolls sat in a perfect line. As I passed, I could swear their tiny glass eyes turned to follow me. I walked faster. The books were the worst. They were bound in materials that didn't quite look normal, too shiny in some places, too bumpy in others, and sat on the bottom shelves. One had fallen open on the floor, its pages covered in text that seemed to change when viewed from the corner of my eye. I stepped carefully around it, remembering the first rule about not touching things that moved on their own. The temperature kept dropping as I moved through Section P. My breath was now visible in small clouds, even though it was August in Chicago. The warehouse's air conditioning shouldn't be able to make it this cold. That's when I felt it. A low vibration starting beneath my feet. At first, I thought it might be a truck at the loading dock or some heavy machinery, but when I looked down, the concrete floor was wrong. The solid surface rippled like water disturbed by a stone, with circles spreading outward from a point somewhere behind me. I turned and saw the ripples coming from deeper in the warehouse, from the center. The vibration got stronger, and the floor under my feet began to move slightly. The items on the shelves rattled. One of the glass containers fell and broke, and the shadow inside didn't disappear, but flowed across the floor like spilled oil, moving with purpose toward the source of the ripples. That was enough for me. I gave up any thought of continuing my inventory work and ran. My scanner bounced against my hip as I sprinted north, following the compass on my phone. The vibration chased me, the rippling floor making it hard to stay balanced. Twice I almost fell, grabbing shelves to catch myself and immediately pushing away, afraid of what I might touch. I ran until my lungs hurt, until the concrete under me became solid again, and the vibration faded. Finally, I stopped, bending over with my hands on my knees, trying to catch my breath. When I looked up, I saw the letter F painted on the floor. I'd made it back to a familiar section. As my breathing slowed down, I spotted the loading dock exit about 50 yards away. Someone stood there, waving at me. It was Roger, his skinny body lit from behind by the security lights outside. "Shift's over early tonight," he called, his voice echoing slightly in the cavernous space. "We can leave now." Something felt off. I checked my watch. Only 3:30 a.m. We still had hours to go on our shift. Roger had been clear about the hours when I started, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. The third rule flashed in my mind. If someone calls your name, verify their face before responding. Roger hadn't called my name, but the same principle applied. I squinted, trying to get a better look at his face from this distance. He was standing half in shadow, and I couldn't see his features clearly. He waved again, more insistently this time. I turned away, pretending I hadn't seen him. I walked in another direction, going between shelves to lose sight of him. A tap on my shoulder nearly made me jump. I spun around to find the real Roger standing there with a serious look. He put a finger to his lips, telling me to stay quiet, then pointed toward the loading dock. The other Roger was still there, still beckoning, but now that I looked more carefully, I could see what was wrong. Its proportions weren't quite right, arms slightly too long, torso too narrow, and its face. The smile it wore stretched impossibly wide, going beyond where a human mouth should end. As we watched, the features seemed to change and twist, like clay being reshaped. The real Roger tugged at my sleeve, pulling me deeper into the shelves, away from the loading dock and the thing pretending to be him. We moved quietly, taking a roundabout route through sections F and G until we reached a small alcove with a janitor's closet. You almost walked right to it, Roger whispered once we were hidden from view. His face was even paler than usual, a sheen of sweat visible on his forehead despite the cool air. What was that thing? I asked, keeping my voice low. Roger shook his head. We don't name them. Makes them stronger somehow. He looked around the corner, checking if we'd been followed. It's not the first time one's used my face. They know the supervisors have authority, that new people trust us. But how did it know to imitate you specifically? They watch us, learn from us. Roger checked his watch. We need to get you back to your assigned sections. It's not safe to stay in one place too long, especially after an encounter. What about that vibration? The floor was moving. Roger's expression darkened. You went too close to the center. That happens sometimes when it gets active. When what gets active? The thing under the warehouse. Roger said this matter-of-factly as if discussing the weather. Come on, let's move. Stay close. Walk exactly where I walk. We left the alcove and made our way through the maze of shelving. Roger moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had navigated this space countless times, always keeping us in the better-lit areas, avoiding deep shadows and intersections where multiple aisles met. How did you find me? I asked as we walked. Inventory trackers have GPS, he replied without looking back. When I saw yours moving into P section, I knew you were in trouble. New people always get turned around their first night. We reached Section H, one of my originally assigned areas. The familiar merchandise, normal consumer goods without moving shadows or watching eyes, was almost comforting. Finish your shift here, Roger said. Don't wander again. If you need to move sections, check your map first. He handed me a new piece of paper. And here's an updated rule list. The basics are the same, but there are some clarifications you should know. I took the paper and unfolded it. The original 5 rules were there, but now there were small notes beneath each one, providing additional details. Under Rule 2, it specified, the center moves. If shelves narrow or temperature drops, you've gone too far. Follow compass north immediately. The center moves? I asked, looking up from the paper. Roger nodded. Nothing stays still in here for long. That's why the inventory never makes sense. The warehouse rearranges itself when no one's looking. He checked his watch again. I need to check on Megan. Her hand was worse than I thought. Is she going to be okay? If she follows the rules from now on, yes. Roger turned to leave, then paused. You did good, not going to that thing at the loading dock. Most new people don't last this long. With that not-so-comforting comment, he disappeared between the shelves, leaving me alone again with my scanner and the updated rules. I returned to my inventory work, but kept my eyes peeled now. Every few minutes, I checked my location against the map and made sure I knew which way I was facing. The incident had shaken me up, but strangely, I wasn't ready to quit. There was something almost addictive about surviving in this place, about knowing the rules that kept you alive when others might fail. As I looked at a box of kitchen appliances, I thought about what Roger had said about the warehouse rearranging itself. It explained the random inventory arrangement, but raised so many more questions. What was this place really? And what was the thing under the warehouse that caused the floor to ripple? I pushed those thoughts aside and focused on counting blenders. The pay was still good, better than good, and now I understood why. I just needed to follow the rules, finish my shift, and decide if I was coming back tomorrow. But as I worked, I couldn't shake the image of that other Roger at the loading dock, its face distorting as it realized its trick had failed. Nor could I forget the feeling of the solid concrete floor moving like water beneath my feet, rippling outward from something at the center of the warehouse, something that, according to Roger, was active tonight. My hand stopped on the scanner as I got really tired. I'd been working for 6 hours straight. walking through the endless aisles of Section E, and my body was starting to give up. My eyes hurt from staring at tiny barcodes under bright lights, and my back hurt from bending to scan items on lower shelves. I had to blink hard several times to see clearly. I checked my watch. 4 a.m., 2 more hours to go. I could do this. I just needed something to wake me up. Coffee. I suddenly thought, there had to be coffee somewhere in this massive warehouse. The break room would have a coffee machine, right? Every workplace had one. The fourth rule quickly came to mind. Never enter the break room during night shift. I tried to ignore it, focusing instead on scanning a row of small appliances. But my movements were getting sloppy, and I had to rescan several items when the device beeped in error. My eyelids felt really heavy. Just staying upright was becoming a challenge. Maybe there was another place to get coffee. I hadn't seen any vending machines, though, and Roger hadn't mentioned any alternatives when going through the rules. I finished the current aisle and moved into the main corridor that ran the length of the warehouse. From here, I could see all the way to the front entrance, and in the opposite direction, deeper into the building. About halfway down the corridor, a door was marked "Break Room" in faded letters. As I watched, the door shook slightly in its frame. Colored lights, blue, purple, red, came out from underneath it, into the corridor like a nightclub. It was so strange to see in this warehouse with its concrete floors and metal shelving that I stopped and stared. I took a few steps closer, curiosity making me forget how tired I was. As I approached, I could hear music, upbeat and lively, and the sound of multiple people laughing and talking. It sounded like a party, the kind of gathering where everyone was having a good time. The fourth rule came back to me, but the sounds were so normal, so human, that it was hard to see the danger. I moved a little closer, still keeping a safe distance. The sounds changed. The music and laughter faded, replaced by dishes making noise and a coffee machine brewing. I could hear people talking quietly, newspaper pages turning, a spoon hitting against a mug. Then I smelled it, rich, aromatic coffee, fresh and hot, and something else, the sweet smell of pastries like donuts or cinnamon rolls just out of the oven. My stomach growled loudly, reminding me that I hadn't eaten since before my shift started. My mouth watered thinking about hot coffee and something sweet to eat. Without really noticing, I had moved closer to the door. I was now only a few feet away, close enough to reach out and touch the handle if I took another step. The door was still shaking slightly, making the hinges creak softly. From inside, a new sound emerged, the high-pitched wail of a baby crying. The sound really scared me. It was followed by a voice that made me feel terrified. "James, I need you. Please come help me." My mom's voice. No mistaking it with that slight Midwestern accent, and the way she always said my name with the second syllable a bit higher than the first. But it couldn't be. My mom had died 3 years ago from pancreatic cancer. I was holding her hand in the hospital when she passed away. My hand was reaching for the door handle. I didn't remember deciding to move, but there it was, my fingers just inches from the metal. The baby. Was it supposed to be my little sister who had died as a newborn, before I was born? The crying kept going, desperate and needy. "James, why won't you help us? Don't you love us anymore?" My mother's voice again, now with a note of hurt that twisted in my chest. The fifth rule hit me. Ignore all voices that don't come from a person you can see. I stopped my hand in midair as I fought the urge to open the door. The smells got stronger. Coffee and pastries, but now also my mother's apple pie and the lavender lotion she always used. Smells from my childhood, from home, from safety. I took a step backward. As I moved away from the door, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Wet footprints led from under the break room door into the corridor. Not water, but something darker and thicker that looked wet under the lights. The footprints went about 10 feet before suddenly ending, as if whoever or whatever made them had just disappeared mid-step. I saw movement at the far end of the corridor. Roger was there. He was waving his arms like crazy, trying to get me to move away from the door. When he saw I was looking, he pointed at his watch, then held up 2 fingers. 2 more hours. Then he mouthed words I could just barely make out. That's not a break room at night. The voices from behind the door changed, becoming a chorus that included not just my mother, but other voices I knew. My father, my ex-girlfriend, old friends, all calling my name, all asking me to come inside, all saying they needed me. I backed away, 1 step at a time, keeping my eyes on the door. The colored lights under it got brighter, and the door started to shake in its frame. The voices got louder and more urgent, with my mother's now sounding desperate and pleading. "James, please, I'm in pain. I need you." I kept backing up until I bumped into something solid. Roger had crossed the corridor and was now standing behind me, his hand gripping my shoulder with surprising strength. "Keep moving," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the cacophony from the break room. "Don't look back." He led me away, down a side aisle between tall shelves that blocked the break room door from view. The voices got quieter as we moved away from the shaking door, but I could still hear my mother calling my name, the sound getting softer until it was finally gone. When we were several aisles away, Roger stopped and let go of my shoulder. His face was even more tired than usual, with dark circles under his eyes. "That was close," he said, keeping his voice low. "Too close." "What's in there?" I asked, my own voice shaking slightly. "I heard my mother. She's been dead for 3 years. Roger nodded seriously. "It knows things about you, things it shouldn't be able to know. That's why Rule 4 exists." "But what is it?" "During the day, it's just a break room, vending machines, microwave, coffee maker, tables. Normal." Roger glanced back toward the main corridor, though we couldn't see the break room door from here. "At night, it's something else. A trap. It shows you what you want to see, what you need. For some people, it's food or rest. For others, it's loved ones they've lost. Those footprints. Don't ask about the footprints," Roger cut me off sharply. "Just be glad they weren't yours." He checked his watch. 2 more hours, you can make it. Just keep following the rules." I almost didn't, I admitted. I was so tired and the coffee smelled so real. "It is real," Roger said. "That's what makes it dangerous. The coffee, the food, it's all real. But the price..." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Let's just say no one who's gone in there during night shift has come back out. Not as themselves, anyway." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the warehouse's temperature. "What do you mean, not as themselves?" Roger didn't answer directly. Instead, he pulled out a small thermos from his jacket pocket and handed it to me. "Here, it's not hot anymore, but it's coffee. Real coffee that doesn't want anything from you." I took the thermos gratefully, unscrewing the cap and taking a long sip. The coffee was lukewarm and bitter, but it was the best thing I'd tasted all night. "Finish your section," Roger said, taking the thermos back after I'd had a few sips. "Stay away from the main corridor. I'll come find you when the shift ends." He turned to leave, then paused. "You're doing better than most first-timers. Just remember, 2 more hours. The rules keep you alive." With that, he walked away between the shelves, leaving me alone again with my scanner and my thoughts. I returned to Section E, trying to focus on the inventory work. The coffee had helped a little, enough to keep my eyes open and my mind alert. But I couldn't shake the memory of my mother's voice, so real and so desperate, coming from behind that vibrating door. Or the dark footprints leading away from the break room, stopping suddenly like whatever made them had just vanished. As I scanned items, I kept checking my watch. 4:15 a.m., 4:30 a.m. Time seemed to crawl now that I was counting the minutes. But I kept working, kept following the rules. 2 more hours. I could do this. The first hint of dawn showed up as the darkness started to lighten through the high windows. I'd been so into my work that I hadn't noticed the night ending. The gray morning light came through the dusty glass, making the warehouse seem less scary. With the darkness gone, I could see the warehouse was just a big storage building full of regular stuff. I checked the inventory device one last time. The screen showed I'd logged 87% of my assigned sections. Not perfect, but good for a first night, especially with everything that had happened. My fingers were stiff from hours of scanning, and my back hurt from bending to reach items on lower shelves, but I'd made it. The night was almost over. The overhead PA system crackled to life, making me jump. I was really tired. A flat, automated voice filled the warehouse. Attention night shift, sunrise in 15 minutes. Secure all open containers and return to entrance. I tucked the scanner into my pocket and started making my way toward the front entrance, following the large directional letters painted on the floor. As I walked through Section D, something caught my eye. A can of soup wobbled on the edge of a shelf, then fell. It wasn't the first time I'd seen this happen tonight, but what followed was different. Another can fell, then another. Within seconds, items were tumbling from shelves throughout the visible area. Dozens, then hundreds of objects dropping to the floor almost simultaneously. I stopped, watching as chaos broke out around me. Cans rolled across the concrete, books fell open and flapped their pages like wounded birds trying to take flight, toys activated with mechanical whirs and electronic voices. A child's doll nearby sat up after falling, its plastic head rotating with a click. All of these objects, every single one, began moving in the same direction, as if pulled by some invisible force. They slid, rolled, or dragged themselves across the floor, heading deeper into the warehouse, toward the center. The center that Roger had warned me to avoid. I backed away, pressing myself against a shelf as a stream of merchandise flowed past like a bizarre parade. A teddy bear walked on stubby legs, its sewn mouth working silently. A set of silverware clinked and scraped across the concrete, the knives using their blades to pull themselves forward. Even heavy items like small appliances jerked and shuddered their way across the floor. The warehouse had come alive with movement, all of it flowing inward like water down a drain. I stayed perfectly still, remembering the first rule: never touch items that move independently. There were so many now that touching one seemed inevitable if I moved, so I remained still, watching the movement. After what felt like forever but was probably only a minute or two, the flow of objects began to thin. I took my chance and hurried toward the entrance, careful to step over or around the stragglers still making their way toward the center. Roger was waiting at the entrance, leaning against the wall next to the time clock. His eyebrows raised slightly when he saw me approach. "You made it," he said, his tone suggesting mild surprise. "Most don't, their first night." I punched my time card with shaking hands. "What was that?" Everything started moving at once. "Sunrise protocol," Roger said simply, as if that explained everything. He gestured toward the exit door. "Come on. Day shift will be here soon." We walked through the small office area where I'd first met Roger just hours ago. It seemed like days had passed since then, not a single night. Roger opened the exit door and the cool morning air hit my face. I hadn't realized how stale the air inside the warehouse had become until I breathed fresh air again. The parking lot was gray in the early morning light. The sun wasn't up yet, but the eastern sky was getting brighter. I noticed other workers coming out from different exits around the building. Maybe 15 people total. Many walked with limps or had visible bandages. One woman's arm was in a sling. Another man had a patch over his left eye. All of them had the same exhausted, hollow look with thousand-yard stares. Roger took out a small envelope from his pocket and handed it to me. "Hazard pay," he explained. "Double rate for following all 5 rules." I opened the envelope and found cash inside. Actual bills, not a check. The amount was way more than I'd expected for a single shift. No wonder the pay had seemed too good to be true during the interview. "What happens in there?" I asked, looking back at the warehouse. Its concrete exterior revealed nothing of the strangeness within. What are those things? Roger shrugged. No rule against asking questions, he said. But no guarantee of answers either. He looked at me. See you tonight? I looked at the warehouse. Then I looked down at the cash in the envelope. Enough to make a big dent in my overdue rent and maybe even keep the electricity on for another month. Yeah, I said finally. I'll be back.